Danger, Will Robinson, danger! Do you guys like robots? I like robots. Let's talk about robots.
Anvil of War! Let's talk tactics!
So today we're going to talk about Kastelan robots. These are one of my favorite units to put into any Admech list. Obviously, if you're going for a competitive list, these guys, I would say, are almost an auto-include in the sense that they can put out an ungodly amount of either shots or attacks, depending on the variant that you take. My personal preference is to take the shooty version. I love these guys, the three heavy phosphor blasters. We'll talk about the statistics on these awesome weapons later, but these guys are going to threaten key parts of your opponent's army and really threaten the back battle line if you can keep them protected and keep them shooting. So quickly, we're going to go run through all the statistics for these guys. These guys have a movement of 8 inches, a weapon skill of 4+, and a ballistic skill of 4+, which is pretty decent. A strength of 6, a toughness of 7, and 6 wounds. These guys are resilient. 3 attacks apiece, a leadership of 10, which the max size of squad you're going to be taking of these guys is 6. So realistically, with 6 wounds, toughness 7, you're not going to lose more than 2 a turn, so you don't really have to worry about morale very much. That leadership 10 is really not going to come into play, or it is going to come into play and keep these guys around. They also have a save of 3+. The save on these guys is really interesting because their shields give them a 5+ invulnerable save, and they have the 3+ armor save. So the battle protocols work in the following way. You basically choose one of the 3 options that they have. At the end of the movement phase, you can engage them in a specific protocol. They start off in the Aegis protocol. The Aegis protocol gives them the +1 to their invulnerable saves and +1 to their armor saves, bringing them up to a 2+ armor save and a 4+ invulnerable save. With that toughness 7 and the 6 wounds, these guys are going to stick around on the tabletop. The other thing that's really cool about the protocols is it doesn't take effect. Some people don't like this and some people do like this. It doesn't take effect till the start of the next battle round, specifically battle round. So if you're going first, it's very important to keep track of when you're going to be engaging these protocols, unless you use stratagems, which we'll talk about later. But it takes effect at the start of your next turn. So when you start the game, you're starting in your Aegis protocol. Again, that's the +1 armor save, +1 invulnerable save also. But when you decide to choose to change that protocol, you need to be paying attention to the right moment to sort of strike. And that's where the other 2 protocols come into effect. So one is the Conquered protocol. So this essentially allows them to attack twice. These guys have 3 attacks apiece, so that's going to be 6 attacks. Now, obviously, if you have them in the shooting variant, you're not going to want to use this because it renders them unable to shoot while they're in that protocol. But if you have them with the Kastelan fists and you have them with the Incendi combustor, you're losing the flamer ability because you can't shoot that, but you're going to be getting 6 strength 10 AP -3, 3 damage flat attacks, which is insane. If you have a full complement of 6 of these guys attacking in combat with those fists, that's essentially power fists, they're just going to shred whatever they're attacking. They're going to, they could pick a fight with a Bane Blade, run up to a Bane Blade and just wipe it out. Now, you're going to be playing a lot more aggressively if they're in a combat variant, so they're not going to stick around as long also. So again, the reason that I have these guys in the shooting variant is because they are definitely my preferred variant, and we'll get into why shortly when we talk about stratagems. Then there's the Protector protocol. This allows them to shoot twice. They cannot move or charge, so it does render them from moving around the table. Again, at this point, you want to move these guys up to a key point of the battlefield. They have 36-inch range on the heavy phosphor blasters, which we're going to talk about in a second. But you want to move them to a key point on the battlefield, lock them down into the Protector protocol because they're not moving, and then just mow units down. I mean, these guys, if used properly with the stratagems and the characters that we're going to talk about very shortly, you're going to be able to pick a unit in the opponent army and delete it. Doesn't matter what it is, Imperial Knight, etc., it's probably going to go down. And I'm going to explain why. These guys have 3 shots with their heavy phosphor blasters apiece, and each of them has 3 heavy phosphor blasters. That's a total of 9 shots per model. They're strength 6, AP -2 with only 1 damage. Nothing too glorious about that, although strength 6 shots with 9 apiece is pretty scary. In the Protector protocol, they're firing twice. That means 18 shots per model. That is scary. Alternatively, you could use the Incendine Combustors. These have a 12-inch range, they're strength 5, AP -1, 1 damage apiece. They're flamer weapons with 12-inch range. They're pretty good. They're essentially a heavy flamer with 12-inch range. So they automatically hit as well because they're a flamer weapon. This firing twice can be pretty nasty, but you can't change their arms to have this weapon option. It's only the shoulder mount that can be changed to this. So the best situation to equip these weapons would be, again, on a unit that wants to charge up and get close to the opponent. So you're probably going to want to pair these off with the Kastelan fists. So as I said before, my personal preference for these guys is the shooting variant. We're going to talk again about complementing units, complementing characters, complementing stratagems for these guys, but my preferred unit size would be 4. I think 6 is a little too much of a point sink, especially in a competitive list. You don't want so much of your army being dedicated to a one-trick pony. Again, they are really durable, so they're going to stick around on the tabletop, but you don't want them to get engaged in combat, so you need to use them effectively. And in order to do so, you want to make sure that you're throwing a screen in front of them. You want to make sure that you're stopping enemy units, little chaff units and little toss-away units in the opponent's army that they're going to want to throw in and engage these guys in combat to stop them from being as effective as they can be. Which is why I generally like to pair them off with characters, not only for the reroll bonus of the auras of characters, but because they're also going to be a preventative measure to be able to jump in and engage units before they threaten the robots or after they've threatened the robots, to get the opponent off of them so that they can keep doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is blasting away units. So when we're talking about synergies with characters, I have to mention at first the Datasmith. The Datasmith is an elite choice. He's going to jump in with these guys, and he's the reason that they can change protocols. If you do not have a Datasmith in your army, you're not going to be changing their protocols without using a stratagem, which again, we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the Cybernetic Datasmith is going to be able to change their protocols. He's a character, so he can't be targeted if you place him properly within the models. And he's not too bad in combat, and he's got a decent enough equipment loadout that you can throw him on the tabletop confidently. My personal preference lately within a competitive list is to actually not include him. This is going to seem a little weird because you're sinking so many points into these robots, you would want the ability to change their protocols. But I'll explain why I don't do that when we get to the stratagem portion, because I feel like you can better spend those points on something else and still pull off the tactics that you want to use with this unit. The next character that we're going to talk about is a Tech Priest Dominus, or the big man himself, Belisarius Cawl. This guy, either of these options is basically dependent on which Forge World you go with. If you're taking Mars, I highly recommend throwing Belisarius Cawl again with this unit. And he's also my reason for not taking 6 of these. If I didn't have Belisarius Cawl and his points value associated with these guys and part of their presence on the tabletop, I would most likely take more of the robots in exchange for his points value. So what these guys are going to do is they're going to give this unit the aura, which is going to allow them to reroll hit shots. This guy allows them to reroll ones. This guy lets them reroll everything. Again, here's your hint. If you're playing Admech and you want a heavy shooty army, I'm going to highly recommend that you take the Mars Forge World. And the reason for that is that you get Belisarius Call, who's going to give you those rerolls. But there's another reason for taking the Mars Forge World, and that is the Mars stratagem. When we're talking about stratagems, Wrath of Mars is by far the best stratagem in the book, in my opinion. The reason is it gives all 6s to wound the ability to do a mortal wound to your opponent. This high amount of shots that you're going to be pumping out with a 4-man squad or a 6-man squad of these guys, with the rerolls to hit because of Belisarius, the sheer volume of 6s that you're going to roll is going to most likely kill or heavily damage whatever you're shooting at. And that's not factoring in that the damage that you do with those weapons and with those 6s are still rolled. So you're still rolling those strength 6 shots as to wound and the damage associated with them at the AP -2. So if you don't kill it with the mortal wounds that you're putting out, you're also going to be forcing your opponent to take quite a few armor saves, most likely. Most stuff you're going to be targeting with these guys is going to be the heavy hitting stuff in your opponent's army, which means you're probably going to be wounding on a 5+. If it's something that's like toughness 7 or 8, etc. You're going to want these guys to be shooting at those targets because that's what they're really good at destroying. But you're going to want to pop that Wrath of Mars stratagem and give them 6s to wound equal a mortal wound plus the additional damage. If you're not running Mars and you still want to include these guys on the tabletop, there are stratagems that complement them for other Forge Worlds. The Styges and the Lucius stratagems allow them to pop up on the tabletop anywhere outside of 9 inches. Again, if you're running a 6-man squad with the Fists and the Flamers, this can be really, really nasty. But again, remember that when you change protocols, you have to wait till the end of the battle round / beginning of the next battle round before it starts to take effect. So you might be waiting a little bit, so you won't be able to drop them in. But there's a kicker, and that kicker is Binaric Override. Binaric Override allows them to change protocols at the end of any phase. So if you time it properly, at the end of the enemy's morale phase, you can have these guys potentially ready to shoot twice in your next shooting phase, which is really, really nasty, and it's a big surprise against your opponent. The only downside to this is they cannot change their protocol again for the remainder of the battle, which is why I talked about in a competitive list, maybe saving some points and not including the Datasmith if you're taking the shooting variant, because the first turn you move them up, you get them in that position that you want them on the table. Make sure they have good line of sight through certain pathways on the table in between the terrain. And then you just lock them in. And if you have a good screen and you have enough stuff out there to protect them and keep them out of combat, they can go 2-3 turns deleting a unit per turn off the tabletop. And these are big units that they should be targeting. Again, you know, Imperial Knights, any large unit in your opponent's army, key parts of your opponent's army, maybe big portions, points heavy units, you're going to delete them from the tabletop. And that's going to make these guys scary and get their points back fast. There's a couple other complementary stratagems for this unit. Rage of the Machines is a good one. Because they're vehicles, it allows them to ignore the fact that they are moving and firing heavy weapons, so they won't receive that -1 penalty. So, you know, 4+ ballistic skill, you've got Belisarius nearby, you're rerolling 1s, 2s, and 3s, which is fantastic, unless you're targeting something that gives you minuses. But overall, with that many shots that you're going to be throwing out, plus the rerolls, you should be hitting a lot of the time. So that can really help in the sense that it gives you no negative if you move that turn. Now, they're not going to be obviously shooting twice because they can't move in the turn that you have them finally switch into the Protector protocol. So really, it's situational. If you're not switching them into Protector Protocol, it does help with their damage output. The last one I want to talk about is Machine Spirit's Revenge. Now, what it essentially does is if this unit, if one model from this unit is destroyed in close combat, you can choose to automatically detonate it and automatically explode it. So this can be really helpful in a squad like this. Many other armies have the ability to auto-destruct their units and auto-explode their units, but with a unit of vehicles like this, you can choose to blow it up at a key moment, and your opponent's really going to want to engage these guys, especially in the shooting variant. They're going to want to get close. So with 6 wounds apiece, it's sometimes, and such large bases, sometimes it's worth it to auto-detonate, knowing that you're only going to suffer the 3 wounds on your next unit. You're going to basically cut one guy down, your next guy down to half, but those 3 wounds could kill a character, they could kill something significant that's engaged in combat with them, or do those wounds to make your opponent worry about what comes next. There's many other ways to affect these guys with stratagems and with the other Forge Worlds that may complement them in different ways, and I'd love to hear from you guys and know your personal preferences on how you guys like to run your Kastelan robots.
Sponsored by
Thanks for watching Anvil of War Gaming. If you like our videos and you want to check out more of our content, click on the links on the screen or below.
Okay, I'm done.